Wouldn't it be nice to have several thought leaders in your industry know and love your brand? Start a podcast. Invite your industry's thought leaders to be guests on your show and start reaping the benefits of having a network full of industry influencers. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome back to B2B Growth. I'm Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. Today, I'm joined by Vivek Khandelwal. He is the founder of iZooto. Vivek, how's it going today, sir?
Great. Thanks for having me here, Logan. Excited to be on the podcast.
Well, we are excited to chat with you, Vivek. We're going to be talking about how your website traffic may be a vanity metric and how to look at it differently and what to do and what to measure when it comes to your website traffic truly. Before we jump into today's topic, I'd love for you to give listeners a little bit of background on yourself, iZooto, and why you're the guy talking about this today.
Right. Thanks. Yeah. So I'm Vivek Khandelwal. I'm the founder and CEO at iZooto. I started iZooto with three of my co-founders, Neil, Sachin, and Shrikant, back in March 2016. This is our second business together as founders, though we decided to bootstrap this time around. Right, we're now on our path to chalk out our journey from getting to from $5 million to $15 million as a business. We've been around for about 3.5 years, as I mentioned.
I love it. As a bootstrap startup ourselves here at Sweetfish, we love hearing from other bootstrapped startups and the journey that they're going through. So we'll have to chat a little bit more about that maybe another time. But today we're going to be jumping right into how to measure your website traffic more effectively. Let's start, Vivek, with what we mentioned at the top of the interview here, that a lot of folks are just looking at their overall traffic metrics, and that can really be kind of misleading. It can be a vanity metric, as you say.
Yes, absolutely. So one thing that we have figured out, not only as a business but also as part of our larger mission as a company, is how for the longest time marketeers across verticals, across categories of businesses, have been obsessed with vanity metrics, irrespective of the scale of the business itself. Right, and traffic sort of continues to plague the vision of the marketeer in action. Right, and this is what also sort of becomes a very limiting agent for these marketers to create true impact at scale. Right, and the classic example here is the fact that traffic fundamentally is noise. Right, and I'll just sort of go after the literal meaning of traffic. Right, Logan, imagine yourself stuck on 101, stuck on classic traffic in 101. Right, or imagine yourself moving on the highway with traffic. Right, anything which you see or observe is just again what you see and observe. Right. What sort of really becomes exciting is when you get clear attention from your site visitors, right? What marketers start obsessing about in the early days, and often, even in case of mature businesses, is they look at traffic numbers for every single decision. Right. What actually matters the most is the signal part, which essentially what I would like to call as owned audience. Right. when marketers are able to convert anonymous traffic into an own audience, that's when things start becoming interesting, right? Own audience is, and the way we sort of like define it is, whenever an anonymous visitor commits to you, which essentially is converting their interest into intent, and converting that intent into uh, into a clear consent along with their identity. In simpler words, whenever they, let's say, give you their email ID, or subscribe to your push notifications, or give you their mobile number, right, to contact them, right, that's when they sort of become part of your own audience, giving you as a brand an opportunity to strike a conversation with you, right? It is essentially at this point in time, you have access to their attention, right? As compared to just having their attention, which is what the traffic essentially stands for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Vivek. It echoes a little bit of what I've heard Eric Sharp from Protofuse talk about. He is a co-host here on B2B Growth, the B2B website series. We'll put a link to that in the show notes, because there have been some good touch points on that in the past in that series. And he echoed, what you're saying here is that not all traffic is good traffic. Kind of taking that a little bit in a different direction. But what you're saying here is that looking at traffic is just one step. As you and I were talking a little bit offline, you talked about, traffic needs to lead to meaningful attention, which hopefully leads to a meaningful conversation, which hopefully leads to an actual sales process. So tell us a little bit about what marketers can do to start to measure those next more important points in their buyer journey as they move people along those different conversion points from just bland unknown traffic that could be good, could be bad, but at the end of the day, it's really unknown, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first step really is so first step is really acknowledging exactly what you said, right? First step is acknowledging that, hey, out of the, let's say, the 100 random visitors that come on the website, 50 of those are just landed there, right? They're not really your buyers, or they're not ready to buy from you, right? Some of them came back to your website because they saw your brand on social media, they read a blog about you, or they saw your tweet or LinkedIn post or whatever else, right? Some of them came back because they already had a knowledge about your brand. They were touched by you earlier on in the journey. Some of them were existing email subscribers, for example, right? And some of them were actually your loyal users, right? Some of them are your potential customers, right? I think the first step lies in, for market knowledge, that the split of of the visitors on the website looks like this, which is flybys, people who come in and go away, some repeat users, some repeat audience, right? Some really loyal subscribers, and some people who are really ready to buy from you as a brand, right? Once you understand this, that's when you're sort of able to say, okay, I want to treat these guys differently. I want to treat these different users differently. And that's when the journey towards understanding their behavior starts, right? And that's when you say, okay, I have these guys on the website. Now I want to have their meaningful attention, right? Which is, I want them to consume my content. And at some point in their consumption, I would like to ask them a thing or two about themselves, right? And that could be a very, very simple, like, hey, are you a business, or are you looking at something specific, or are you just browsing, right? Or something like, hey, you have been here before a couple of times. Would you mind telling us a bit more about yourself? Right? Something which starts a conversation, right? Something which tells the end user that they're talking to a brand and not a website, right? And once that meaningful attention is sort of converted into a conversation, right, that's when you are able to establish some intent on the user's part and say, okay, I have some clear interest and intent for this from this particular user, right, on our category or our product, right? Let's see now where exactly are they in the buyer journey, right? And the buyer journey in today's world is really complicated, Logan, as you would already know it, right? People research, you and I research before we buy a pair of headphones, right? While buying software, people research way more. They read reviews, they read blogs, they check out competition, they check out a lot of stuff about the category, about your brand before they actually touch your brand, right? In fact, I remember a G2 crowd stat, which I heard from the head of marketing and the founder, in fact, Tim, which mentioned that the average B2B buyer touches or reads about your brand at least 12 times before they actually touch your brand for the first time, right? This essentially, again, given the fact that we now live in an age where information is accessible easily about pretty much every single thing out there on the internet, right? This is exactly what makes the buyer, what gives the control of the purchase in the hands of the buyer, right? We're not living in the 90s or early 2000s where information arbitrage was at play, where simply because as a seller you knew a thing or two about the market, you would have an advantage while selling, right? Buyers are now in complete control of the purchase cycle, and this is exactly what sellers, we as software providers, we as vendors, we as sellers need to get aligned to. If that doesn't happen, right, we won't be able to survive as a business meaningfully.
Imagine it, a spreadsheet filled with rows and rows of your sales enablement assets. You've devoted 2 years to organizing this masterpiece, only for it to stop making sense. This was Chad Trabucco's reality. As the head of sales enablement at Glint, a LinkedIn company, he's responsible for instilling confidence in his sales reps and arming them with the information they need to do their jobs. However, when his glorious spreadsheet became too complex, he realized he needed a new system. That's when Chad turned to Guru. With Guru, the knowledge you need to do your job finds you. Between Guru's web interface, Slack integration, mobile app, and browser extension, teams can easily search for verified knowledge without leaving their workflow. No more siloed or staled information. Guru acts as your single source of truth. For Chad, this meant Glint sales reps were left feeling more confident doing their jobs. See why leading companies like Glint, Shopify, Spotify, Slack, and more are using Guru for their knowledge management needs. Visit b2bgrowth.getguru.com to start your 30-day free trial and discover how knowledge management can empower your revenue teams. Yep, absolutely. As you were talking about research that folks are doing before they land on your website, G2 was actually the first one that was coming to mind. We're big fans of the folks over there. We've had different folks from the G2 team on this podcast before. And it's definitely, when you look at what they're doing and how they're capitalizing on the research and the third-party validation that B2B buyers want before they actually engage with the brand, it just fits with the way that folks buy today. I want to circle back to something you said there, Vivek, about that conversion point from traffic to an owned audience. And you mentioned, you can use this with chat tools. You can do this with forms. We're actually looking at how do we roll out more of these tactics. So it's actually something that we're thinking about a lot here at Sweetfish in how do we get enough information? Because like you said, there are those 3 buckets of traffic, right? Just kind of the passers-by, as they call them in real estate, looky-loos. Then you've got folks that are repeat visitors, and then you have, loyal brand subscribers possibly. And so if you think about those 3, there are some key indicators that can tell you which bucket they fall in. And then you also want to figure out, is this person, did they fit our buyer persona, some sort of lead scoring? And so that can be a lot of information you want to gather, but the more you add there, the more friction there is to that process. So what are some of your best practices or recommendations for B2B marketers to kind of walk that line to get enough information to be able to serve those folks and segment their audience in an efficient way without turning off people with, a 9-step form that just takes too much and they're just like, I'm fed up, and they click away anyway?
Yeah, I think it's a great balancing act that we as marketers today have to maintain, right? But I think the way I would like to approach this problem is one, look at the browsing pattern, right? Again, we could all boil the ocean here, trying to attribute, trying to create the perfect lead scoring model, right? But again, right, let's face it, most of us out there do not have the time and energy and scale in the first place at times to even set this up, right? The idea is to keep it simple and sort of iterate upon it as you go along, right? The way I would start at it is, look at the browsing pattern of the end user, right? Look at what kind of pages and what kind of content is the end user consuming on the website, right? That's one important factor to sort of understand where exactly is this user in the buying persona, in their journey, right? That's one. Second, definitely look at the amount of content that is being consumed as the user is on the blog, on the website. Are they really scrolling down enough? Are they just quitting straight up? Are they just bouncing away from the website immediately? Right. At the same time, as they're consuming content, tools like forms and chatbots are obviously extremely powerful to convert that interest or to capture them in that marketing moment, right? And to sort of trigger a real conversation with these prospects, right? If we have been using chatbots on our website for quite some time now, in fact, we have now seen chat conversation rates between 3% to almost 8%, depending upon the intent of the page, right? For example, a pricing page has almost a 6.5% conversion rate. So out of 100 visitors who land on the website, on the pricing page, at least 6 people would initiate a conversation with us, right? Which is a decent number to sort of start from, right? Another metric to sort of track closely is how many of these users are actually giving you their details for you to establish a relationship with them, right? We've seen email opt-in rates or email submission rates to hover around 5 to 15%, again, depending upon the intent of the page, right? These numbers would also start varying as you look at, depending upon the segment and the category of businesses you are dealing with, right? So if you're dealing with SMBs, you might see slightly higher rates. If you're dealing with mid-market and enterprise customers, you might have slightly lower rates, right? Again, depends completely on your business and your context. But then this is what we have what I've seen personally on iZooto to start with, right? What we've also sort of seen, and I think this is worth mentioning here, is this, right? And this goes back to our first point, which was not all traffic is great traffic, right? In fact, 57% of our traffic is generated from referral links, right? So we have a powered by iZooto thing, which is shown on websites of our customers and our users, right? And we get tons of referral traffic from these websites across the globe, right? And guess what? This traffic generates the highest clutter, highest noise for us in our marketing funnel, right? So much that we actually decided to completely kill this traffic, right? We literally decided to take off our link from that, from our from our prompts on our customer websites, because this is creating way too much chunk in our marketing funnel. And then at some point, we decided to bring it back, put it on a separate landing page and say, okay, we will treat this traffic completely differently. We'll set up a different conversion funnel altogether for these users, right? So yes, again, reiterating the point, all traffic is not good traffic, right? Traffic depends on its source. And the best way to measure traffic is by its intent or by its ability to commit to your brand, right? Which essentially starts from one, having a conversation or them submitting their details to you as a brand, which could be through a landing page form, through a content form, through a newsletter subscription, or by simply signing up for a trial on your website as well.
I love that story, Vivek. It really brings it home and shows that you guys practice what you preach. We opened the conversation talking about that all traffic is not good traffic. And you really demonstrated that with that story about, kind of turning off that traffic, actually saying, no, we don't want this traffic, right? It could be great to look at, and it kind of strokes our egos saying, that we're getting this much traffic, but if it's not good traffic. And so I like the progression that you guys went through there, turning it off, but then turning it back on, but doing it in a more calculated way so that you could measure that, you could filter it. It doesn't just become noise. So I think you've provided some great examples of what folks can do, not just kind of spouting, hey, website traffic is a vanity metric, and so stop measuring it, but what you can do about it. So that was a great example. You also talked about, the 3 buckets, gathering information to not only lead score the folks that are visiting your website, but try to determine what level they're at in intent. Are they a passerby? Are they a repeat visitor? Or are they, a regular subscriber, consumer of your content, whether you're a B2B brand or a media company? I think understanding those 3 buckets as well as your lead scoring is very important. Vivek, if anybody listening to this would like to ask any follow-up questions or stay connected with you or learn more about what you and the team over at iZooto are up to these days, what's the best way for them to reach out and continue this conversation?
Sure. So you could find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @VIVEK. Vivek K. That's my Twitter handle, right? That's the best place to reach out. I'm usually tweeting day in, day out. So yeah, that's a great place to start a conversation.
All right. I love it. Well, Vivek, we'll also link to your LinkedIn profile here in the show notes. I'll also, as I mentioned, make sure that we drop in the show notes a link to our B2B website series. If you like this episode and you want some more tactical advice on building your website for better demand gen and lead conversion, check that out. You can also go to sweetfishmedia.com/blog. Look for the category, the hashtag B2B websites in the categories on the right-hand side. All right, Vivek, this was a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you so much, Logan. Lovely chatting with you.
We totally get it. We publish a ton of content on this podcast, and it can be a lot to keep up with. That's why we've started the B2B Growth Big 3, a no-fluff email that boils down our 3 biggest takeaways from an entire week of episodes. Sign up today at sweetfishmedia.com/big3. That's sweetfishmedia.com/big3.